Vocês sabiam que agora nós temos uma página no Padrim? E quem gosta do Codex e quiser ajudar pode fazer com apenas R$2? É só entrar na página www.padrim.com.br/lordmons. Bem-vindo a mais uma edição de Blizzblizz, do seu programa de debates de World of Warcraft. Essa semana eu postei a entrevista que eu fiz com os dois desenvolvedores da Blizzard, falando sobre vários aspectos do jogo, o patch 7.3, como foi construir o planeta capital da Legião, por que a Blizzard retirou o voo do jogo e qual é realmente a relação entre a luz e o vazio. E essa entrevista eu fiz e coloquei uma dublagem em português para que vocês pudessem escutar a entrevista enquanto estão fazendo outros aspectos do jogo. Mas muita gente pediu para que eu colocasse o som original em inglês para que pudessem escutar. Por isso, hoje eu vou colocar o som original da entrevista. Mas antes eu tenho que explicar algumas coisas. Essa entrevista foi feita com vários geradores de conteúdo ao mesmo tempo, cada um na sua casa, através do computador da internet. E por isso, alguns geradores estavam com som muito baixo. Estava acontecendo uma obra aqui no apartamento de cima e estava um barulho infernal. Por isso, quando eu tive que retirar o meu som, eu tive que me mutar na gravação e apenas as pessoas que estavam participando é que escutavam a minha voz quando eu estava falando. Por isso, em alguns momentos, vai ficar sem som nenhum, vocês não vão escutar nada, mas na realidade é porque eu estou fazendo a pergunta para os entrevistadores, para os que estão sendo entrevistados. Só que mesmo assim, estava um barulho aqui em cima e eles não conseguiram entender direito o que eu estava falando. Por isso, eu vou colocar aqui a entrevista, o som original em inglês, mas esse som está com alguns ruídos, está com alguns barulhos, aparece gato miando no fundo, porque é assim que acontece quando tem várias pessoas participando ao mesmo tempo, cada um com a sua realidade no seu apartamento. Por isso, espero que vocês aproveitem, se divirtem nessa entrevista aqui completa em inglês para todos os jogadores conhecerem um pouco mais do patch 7.3 e o que a Blizzard está preparando para a gente para a próxima expansão de World of Warcraft. Aproveitem e se divirtem. Se divirtam, se divirtem, se divirtam, se divirtam, se divirtam.
Does anybody want to go first?
I'll go first then.
Okay.
My question is about the Blizzard's UI. Legion has brought quite a few changes to Blizzard's UI, and even some new stuff, such as the automatic group finder for world boss quests and stuff like that. My question is, what is still on the board? What are the cool features is the team looking into? And if so, are you guys planning any features to the guild finder UI?
Great. I can actually take that question. I used to be a producer for the UI team, and I'm not working with them as actively right now, but I can actually tell you that the UI team is constantly looking at ways to improve the game. They're constantly listening to people's feedback and looking at add-ons and trying to find, like, what's the biggest bang for the buck that we can add to the game to make it easier. One of the things that the UI team was pretty heavily involved in for 7.3 was the new teleporters and flight system and the Netherlight Crucible. And those are, big changes that they made to try to make it easier to do different things and support the features in the patch. But they're definitely looking towards the future. As far as the guild finder tool, it's a topic of conversation that comes up all the time. And it's definitely something that we're interested in finding more ways to help players connect with. But we don't feel like we've found exactly the right answer, and we want to keep iterating on this until we find exactly how we can bring something to World of Warcraft that's going to make it as easy as possible for you to connect with other players without devaluing guilds. And just for clarity, this is Michael Bybee speaking. It's sometimes hard to hear over the phone. And for everybody asking questions, we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you sometimes. We've got the volume up pretty loud. If you guys could just bear with us, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, so let me ask a question. Argos is a word that was always present in the WoW lore, but it was always unreachable and abstract. How was the process of creating a world so many people waited for?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. It's something that we take very, very seriously. Argus is something, like you said, it's been in the lore since Burning Crusade. It was kind of some of the first mentions of Argus. And so when we went to set about to create the Shadows of Argus patch, we circled all the wagons together. We brought together our artists and our designers and our storytellers and all sorts of different people to try to see how can we create as accurately as possible this world that we've heard so much about and heard so many stories about. And so that's why you see some of these things on Argus that we've never done before, like the incredible backdrops that you can see outside the Vindicar, and all these new demons that we haven't seen before, all these new armor sets. We really put a lot of effort in trying to make, in trying to show what the capital of the Legion looks like, and also making sure we pay homage to what the homeworld of the Eordar looks like and the homeworld of the Draenei. And trying to balance all those things is something that was definitely a challenge, but something that we worked super, super hard on to try to accurately represent to our players.
Okay, nice.
Can you repeat the question, please? Oh, if you guys can mute your microphones if you're not asking a question, it makes it easier so that way we don't hear keywords clicking and all that. All right, is that better? Oh, in your apartment. Right on. No, okay, cool.
So what was the question? When we started, we knew that it was going to end in Argus. Not all of the details had been figured out. We were still focused on wrapping up Legion and working through all the details there, but we knew sort of the big picture story arc, and we just worked to fill in the rest afterwards.
Yeah, it's something where when we set out to create Argus and all the experiences and content there, as we began to develop Argus, we actually built upon our plan and iterated on it a whole bunch, because as we got into building Argus, the entire World of Warcraft team got really excited about the planet itself and all of the opportunities to tell these stories that we found as we began to develop there. So it was actually something that we really grew into as we worked on it. And I think the end result is something that we can all agree is something really cool and special.
All right, I'll go next. How strongly dependent on the Netherlight Crucible bonuses does the team feel like the new raid fights will be, especially on Mythic difficulty?
If I had a little bit of a hard time hearing you there, but it sounded like the question was, how strongly do we feel the new Netherlight Crucible traits will be required for the upcoming raid, especially on Mythic difficulty?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay, great. So obviously, the way we tune class balance for raids takes into account everything that's available for a given class. And so we definitely planned the traits for the Netherlight Crucible, and have tuned and will be doing additional tuning on the raid to take into account the traits on the Netherlight Crucible. With that said, unless you're playing on Mythic difficulty, we don't necessarily feel that those traits are absolutely required. Some of them are helpful, and that's great, but definitely not a requirement. Obviously, for the top tier guilds doing Mythic, every last bit of DPS helps, and so the traits in the Netherlight Crucible and anything else that can go into increasing your player power is definitely something that they're going to be looking for, and we are planning for them to do that.
All right, thank you.
I guess the one other thing I want to add there is, because the Netherlight Crucible is tied into artifact knowledge and your ability to power up your artifacts, we made artifact knowledge something that you don't have to train anymore. Everybody has the same artifact knowledge every week now, and that actually really helps not so much the player who's actively playing right now every day going out and getting artifact power, but if you've got friends or you've got an alt, it helps people catch up. And once the raid comes out, that artifact knowledge is going to be even higher, and it'll be that much easier for players who are currently playing and who might pick it up around then to be able to get back into that and power up their trade.
Cool. Thanks.
Well, my turn. Speaking of Argos, how was the decision of not allowing flight over there?
It wasn't one that we arrived at easily. There was a lot of discussion on the team as to how to best approach this, and then kind of where we ultimately landed was we wanted to do as much as possible, like I was mentioning earlier, to really accurately create this world that we had heard so much about. And Argus is a world that by necessity needed to feel dangerous and be dangerous, and it needed to capture that vibe of being on the capital world of the greatest enemy we've ever faced in World of Warcraft. And so a lot of the considerations we made when deciding to not do flying on Argus was to have the right gameplay and to tell the story through that gameplay. It's something that we value a lot on the World of Warcraft team is, like, yes, we have a lot of amazing cutscenes on Argus you've probably seen and a lot of great stories there, but our biggest storytelling vessel is just the world itself as you're traveling through it. And so we felt that, as you've kind of seen with some of our previous kind of end of expansion patches like the Time of Isle, we felt it was the right decision for the gameplay. And to be certain, it wasn't something that we wanted to do to inconvenience players by any means, and so that's why we took a lot of efforts to make sure that it wasn't difficult to travel on Argus for players. And so that's why we have the Lightforge beacons, which are very similar to flight paths, except that they're instant. So they're actually, in many cases, faster than flying would have been. And to make sure that experience is similar to how you unlock flying on alts, we made sure that those flight networks are unlocked for your alt as well, so that when you're on your third or fourth character, you still feel like you can traverse the world in a meaningful way. But once you're in an adventure space, you still have to deal with it with that constant Legion threat.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Great question.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
You are changing some things related to the Feral Druid specialization. So what do you think is the key point to make it more approachable without simplifying it too much?
So if I understood you right, that question sounded like you were asking about the changes to the Feral Druid spec?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, there was a bit of feedback there.
How to make it more approachable without simplifying it too much.
Yeah, definitely. To be honest, neither Johnny or myself works on the class team, so we're not intimately familiar with all of the changes that are going into the Feral Druid spec. What I can tell you is that the class team is incredibly active listening to the player community, and they're very passionate about trying to make these specs as fun to play as possible while also differentiating them so that people have choices. I actually played a Feral Druid prior to 7.3 on an alt quite a bit, and I didn't really have a lot of fun with it all the time, and so I know that at a high level, some of the changes that they're trying to make will make it easier, but I don't know specifically all the details or why they went about those.
And the class team is definitely always looking for feedback, so we encourage you as you begin to explore the Feral Druid and some of the other specs in 7.3, please provide your feedback on the forums so that we can, continually evaluate where the spec is and where your feelings on it are, because we're in a place where more than ever we can make changes to classes, even on live, to make sure that they're balanced and that they feel right. One change you may remember from, I think it was 7.2 or 7.15, was the change to Beastmaster Hunters, where we took the Mantle of Command legendary power and made it baseline, because players felt like that made such a big difference to how the spec played. So please continue to provide your feedback, and the class team is always open to discussing changes.
So it's actually, there's a lot that goes into the answer to that question. First, we do think that it's doing better than ever before. I have been playing World of Warcraft since before it was ever released, back in the alpha and beta days, and I feel like this game is more vibrant and alive than it has ever been. With these releases coming out all the time, I actually have a hard time, me personally, keeping up with all of the content, but I think that's a much better problem to have than there not being enough to do. So on that side, we're actually really happy with how that's worked out. Some of the things that we have to work through, and this is me as a producer on the team, is trying to figure out how we keep up with the pace without making, kind of wearing the team out. It is a lot of content, and it's a very rapid schedule. And unlike a lot of games where World of Warcraft, a lot of games they release and then they're done, and then the team can take a little bit of a break. A World of Warcraft, we actually don't have that. It's like a constant marathon that never stops. And so we have to be really careful with how we keep the team excited and engaged. With that said, we are thinking a lot about our future content. And one of the things that, we've said this publicly before, but we're thinking about our releases less in terms of big patches where you get a giant pile of content, and more in terms of like an ongoing release cycle. That's why things like the raid come out not exactly when a patch comes out. And that's why things like 7.3's content unlocked over a period of time, and why you have things like the new micro holidays that were added in previous patches. Trying to make it so that if you're a player in World of Warcraft, there's something exciting to look forward to every time you log into the game. And I think we're doing better, and I think we'll continue to improve on that.
Okay, can I go?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, the invasion points are interesting ways to visit other moments in time and places in the game, such as the Caverns of Time. So can we expect more of this in the future?
We're constantly evaluating with each patch, with each piece of content that we create, what things have worked in the past, what things do we want to try new, how can we make this, build on previous World of Warcraft experiences to make them even better in the future. And so it's great to hear that you're really enjoying invasion points. I'm really enjoying them too. And we've really felt that that was an important thing to include on Argus, is to not just showcase the Legion homeworld, but to showcase the entire Legion empire, so to speak, right? All the many worlds that they've conquered. We talk about this all the time, but we wanted to make sure players could actually see it. So in terms of other content in the future, like what we use a similar thing, I think it just depends on the content. It felt like the right approach for Legion, especially for Argus, to have these glimpses into other worlds. And like you mentioned, it felt like the right approach for the Caverns of Time to have these glimpses into other moments in the World of Warcraft lore timeline. So it's something that we'll see in the future, and see if it's appropriate, but it's definitely something we'll keep in our pockets and review as we go forward.
Okay, nice.
Okay, I have a question. Towards the end of the expansion, it is, as usual, we see an increase in power and bonuses from trinkets, raid sets, epic gems, and whatnot. Can we expect people to go really far on Mythic Plus by the end of the expansion, or will it have some readjustments to keep the Mythic Plus 15 achievement relevant, or something like that?
I'm sorry, but you were breaking up a lot during that question.
Oh, sorry about that.
Could you, yeah, sorry, I'm not sure what's going on, maybe a data issue, but would you mind repeating?
Sure. So towards the end of the expansion, we usually see an increase in power and bonuses from trinkets, raid sets, epic gems, and all that. Can we expect people to go really far in Mythic Plus at the end of the expansion, or will it have readjustments to keep the Mythic Plus 15 achievement relevant?
So I do think as player power increases, it gets easier and easier to get further into the Mythic Plus ladder. But we've already made adjustments to that, and we're keeping a pretty close eye on it. We think that it's most interesting when, climbing those difficulty tiers stays relevant. And so if player power starts making it very easy to get past 15 and beyond, and there's not a lot of rewards past that, so the system itself is really sort of built for players to feel the challenge to get to 15. And although I can't say right now that we are absolutely going to rebalance Mythic Plus again, because we've already done that a couple times, right. I do say that the team is paying pretty close attention to it. And given the power increases that are going to come out with Antorus and everything else, I wouldn't be surprised if it's something we decide to do in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I go on? Oh, okay.
Yeah, go, of course.
Okay, about our artifacts, weapons, Doomhammer, Ashbringer. First of all, in the past, I think it was Ion that said that we are not going to carry artifact weapons to the next expansion. That's still the case, or it's going to change? And the second part of the question, after this, we have the artifact weapons for 1 year. Do you guys like the system? Do you think there's something you like to change right now? Oh, let it go again.
We definitely feel really good about the artifact system. We feel it's worked out really well. It's provided a constant source of player power and a constant source of things to chase in the form of artifact power, right? There's always something you can do in Legion to increase your power. And much like other systems that you may have seen in previous expansions, when the time for other content comes around, we will review what we like and what we dislike about artifacts, what we thought worked well and maybe not so much. And we might decide to take certain things forward. We might decide to revisit certain things, but it's always a case-by-case thing. And so artifacts, much like any other system, you might recall how the Warlords of Draenor followers kind of evolved into your champions in Legion, right, for your class order. So that's the sort of thing of, we'll always look at these systems, and artifacts are no exception, and try to take the best parts forward. So while we have nothing to share right now in terms of where artifacts will be headed in the future, it's definitely something that we're always talking about and trying to make sure that we always take the good parts forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, my turn then. If everyone. I'm sorry. I don't know if you'll be able to answer me this, but where is Sargeras, and are we actually gonna meet him at any point?
Oh man, I desperately want to tell you more about that, but I can't spoil the story there. You're just gonna have to wait and see.
Okay, so let me make a question I think you will be able to answer.
Okay.
The class-specific lore that is told during the Class Hall campaign has a lot of interesting points, and they were placed as word quests in the Broken Shore in 7.2. Will we have this kind of distinction and distinct content in 7.3?
Just to make sure I'm clarifying, are you asking will there be class order specific content on Argus?
Yeah,
is that
exactly.
where? Okay, sure. Just wanted to double check. So Argus is actually a time where we're trying to focus a little bit more on the grander story of Legion and trying to wrap up some of those threads that we've been going along since the beginning. And so the class orders themselves are not something that we're focusing on quite as much with Legion. We still, or on Argus, sorry. It's still something that we're absolutely paying attention to. We still have little nods and references throughout the Argus experience to your class order. And your class order does, in fact, come with you on the Vindicar to help you fight against the Burning Legion. But this time around, we really wanted to try to focus on the great enemy, right, on ending the Burning Crusade. And so some of the benefits there were that we were able to make all of that content accessible to everyone, right? You mentioned that on Broken Shore, there was a lot of class-specific content, and while we enjoyed the approach then of telling stories unique to your class order, on Argus we really enjoy that you get to see a much larger story on a given character and get to experience that every time you play through. And so this time we're really just trying to focus on the actual Argus campaign.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Right. So still on that, we've seen characters like Khadgar hanging around with us after the end of Warlords of Draenor. Can we expect some of the more important Legion characters to have a strong presence in the next expansion as well?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting that you ask that, right? Warcraft is such an immense universe with so many incredible characters, right? Khadgar being an example, or Illidan, or maybe some characters that we haven't seen in a little while. And so anytime we're moving on to a new piece of content or a new expansion or whatever it is, we always look at, for this given story that we want to tell, or for these stories that we want to tell, who are the characters that are invested in this? Who has a stake in this? Who can we tell an interesting story with, or maybe surprise players with? And so while I can't promise necessarily that everyone involved in Argus will be in the next story as well, we always, we never forget about these characters. And so someone you met on Argus, maybe they don't appear again right away, but maybe they, come a little bit further down the line and they've been up to some other things behind the scenes, and we can explore that. So I can't tell you specifically who will and won't be involved, when, but we always try to make sure that we keep our characters in mind.
Right. And I actually want to add just a little bit more direct answer to that, to say very specifically, we didn't bring Ilaria and Turalian back to not use them again. And I'm not going to say anything else about that, but you will be seeing more of them at some point in the future.
All right,
please don't make her into a boss, please.
I agree with you. I would hate that as well.
And we're glad to hear that you like Ilaria. We really like her too.
Yeah.
Still on this lore question, there's a lot of discussion about the Narrows and Shira after the patch 7.3, because the Narrows was supposed to be the prime good of the universe, and we see that maybe they are not that good. Shira was different, or we have some our perception of the Narrow is not black and white as we thought they were. They were the good, and the Void were the bad guys.
Yeah, it's a great point you brought that up. Something that we really wanted to explore with the Argus storyline was that kind of overarching theme of the light and the shadow, right? And how do those interact with each other, and what do they kind of mean in the greater World of Warcraft universe? And so Zera, right, she is the prime Naru, and like you were kind of touching on, the Naru are the embodiment of the light, but the light isn't necessarily good, right? These primal forces are morally characterized by how they're wielded, right? And so that's not to say that all Naru have the same motives, or that all Void Lords have the same motives necessarily, right? That they each have their own personality and their own goals, but we were trying in the Argus storyline to explore the idea of, maybe all Naru in Zera as an example aren't necessarily good, and that good is kind of told through the player's perspective, right? Because from Zera's perspective, she is doing what she thinks is good, but that good isn't necessarily good for us as heroes of Azeroth. And so we are trying to infuse some of that gray area, that the Void or the Fel can be wielded against the Burning Legion to what is good to us, and just as the light can sometimes be oppressive.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
We still have a little bit more time, so if you guys still want to hash out some questions, please feel free to send them our way.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me by any chance?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Well, I was a little bit late to the interview. I really apologize for that. My name is Juanin from Las Aventuras de Perle, one of the Latin American fan sites for World of Warcraft.
Nice to meet you.
Meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you too, guys. I wanted to ask you, just because we're talking about the lore here, will we see any development in terms of the storylines of the Alliance and the Horde, specifically the Horde, since Sylvanas was kind of super present in base Legion, but that we didn't see a lot of her after the Helia raid? Will we see a little bit more about Sylvanas specifically and the Horde within Legion?
Go ahead.
Sorry, that's a great question, and I'm not sure exactly when you joined, but I kind of sort of touched on this a little bit earlier. The Horde is not sitting idle, right? And Sylvanas, as their leader, is not sitting idle. Obviously, the heroes of the Horde, the greatest heroes of the Horde, our players, are journeying onto Argus with the Velen and Illidan and the Army of the Light, and so they're helping defeat the Greater Legion threat. But back home, the Horde and the Alliance both are helping repel the continued Legion counterattacks on Azeroth and helping bolster their allies, just in case our heroes failed on Argus, right? You never know. And so, like I was kind of talking about, this is something where we are certainly not forgetting about the Horde's story and the Horde's motives and Sylvanas' story and her motives, right? Which, so that's something that as we continue to create content, as we continue to tell stories throughout Legion, we'll make sure that we touch on their perspectives and their motives and what they've been up to this whole time.
Great. Also, in terms of what we can expect from Legion, since this is apparently the last major patch, can we expect a 7.3.5 in the near future?
We're not quite ready to talk about the next release. As you said, 7.3 is the last major content patch for Legion, but we're not done with Legion yet. And so there is more coming, and just stay tuned.
Great. Cool.
You still have Taurus to look forward to, and we're looking forward to it as well. I'm super excited to bring the fight to the Legion's very core of power. And like Bivy was mentioning earlier, we actually don't really think of our content releases in patches quite so much anymore. We're really trying to make sure that there's always something new and exciting to explore. And so we're not done telling stories in Legion yet, and we encourage you to join us on the adventure together.
Continuing a little bit with the idea of what is coming next in Legion, we have Antaurus coming, the big raid for 7.3. Are there any new encounter mechanics that players can really expect and be excited about?
Yeah, there's a lot of different mechanics in the raid. Some of that stuff's already been out on PTR and people have been trying and testing with it. I will say that I'm particularly excited about a couple different fights. One of the ones that I really like is the Portal Keeper Hazabel fight, where she uses and opens portals, and you have to separate your raid to manage different parts of the fight across different spaces that has different impact, and so you have to be really smart about balancing your raids. It's kind of interesting. I also really like the first fight in the raid, where it's just a giant robot that you get to blow its arms off and different parts of its body apart, which is pretty fun. And then, without digging into too much detail, I do want to say, like, some of the other stuff that the team has added, I think people are going to be really interested in. And when the raid is ready to be released and we're ready to dig into that, we'd be happy to talk more about that.
Great. I don't know if any of my other partners here has any other questions. I mean, I do have more, but I just want to share with everyone else.
Just have a question about concordance of Legion Fall itself. What happens once we reach the top at all the specs? I mean, I play as a druid. I don't think I'll ever do that. But as we reach the end of the expansion, we will have reached at least one weapon or two or three. If that happens, are there any plans to make artifact power useful in some other way, or some trader or something like that?
Yeah, it's something we're looking at. I think the original intent of artifact power and the training your traits into your artifact weapon and the concordance of Legion Fall trait is that this was something that you would be able to spend time on and feel like you always had something to do, right? And so the idea that you might eventually get to a cap and not be able to do that anymore and not have any value to add to that artifact weapon is actually, it sort of defeats the purpose of that, right? So it's something that we're paying really close attention to. The other side of that from a design question is we don't want players to feel like it just goes on and on forever, but it's not giving them any benefit, right? So we are watching this pretty closely. We don't have any specifics to talk about right now, I'm sorry, but I will say that in future content updates, there will probably be, the team will be looking really closely at this, and we may make some changes to address some of your concerns.
Cool.
I wanted to add on to that too. One of the other focuses of Shadows of Argus that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about is alts, and then players' other characters you might have to work on. And so if you do perform the rather Herculean task of completing all 4 Druid specs, getting those to very high artifact power, and to be sure, the concordance trait does go on effectively infinitely, but we want to make sure there was kind of a stopping point in that. Once you unlock those last traits on your relic through the Nebulite Crucible, you can always continue to push forward. It's always of value to you, but that's like a reasonable stopping point of like, oh, I feel like I'm reasonably powerful. I can do the content in the game. But one of the other things that Argus is really, really great for is leveling up your alts. We had mentioned earlier that artifact knowledge is something that is now global. So as soon as you hit 110, you'll be set to whatever the current artifact knowledge level is, and that actually increases globally for everyone each week. It's currently at like 43 or 44, something like that. And it'll only continue to increase, I believe, all the way up to 55, which will, so a fresh 110 character, it's very, very satisfying to get that one world quest reward that gives you 35 traits in your base artifact. It's quite the satisfying experience. But Argus also has a lot of other great mechanics in terms, there's a lot of really great gear that you can get using Unsullied Argonite, as well as just through world quests and drops in the world that can really help you grow up very, very quickly. We did a lot of effort to make sure that on your alternate characters, all the Lightforge Beacon flight points are available to you. The Nebulite Crucible itself is available to you, as well as the Seat of the Triumvirate Dungeon. And so while you still have plenty of reason to go through the Argus campaign itself, since it has quite juicy artifact power rewards on it, and obviously some really great stories that we want to share with you, we really feel like Argus is a very incredible time to maybe try out one of those characters you haven't tried in a while. If you haven't tried particularly some of your casters, if you haven't played them in a while, many of the casters receive completely new visuals and animations in patch 7.3. And so if you haven't checked out like Frost Mage or Shadow Priest, I can't possibly do justice in words how cool they are. You really just have to check it out. But it's like playing an entire new class that you've never seen before.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I have a question about the design of the 3 areas in Argus. I don't know if you can answer a little bit about that. I just wanted to ask you if you have seen the feedback on the new 7.3 zones, like what kind of feedback you have collected, and how are you using that feedback to design future zones?
Yeah, definitely we have seen a lot of feedback on the zones. We pay pretty close attention to the forums, what the community is saying all over various fan sites, and we're talking to our team internally as well, and just trying to see what people think, right? That's something that we do all the time, and we definitely are interested in hearing that. As far as like what we're taking away from it and thinking about for future content, I think one of the biggest things is, just trying to get a feel for what people liked about the different spaces that we created. People have been really excited about Makari, for example, and bringing back
exactly. Yes.
Right? Yeah, totally agree. And people tell us that they love how we incorporated the ancient Eridar civilization into the patch. And so we think about why are people saying that? What is that? Part of it is that people were seeing black and green for so long that bringing Makari in just changes the perspective, and it adds this beautiful, but it's also really open, and it gives you a lot of space to run around in and explore, and it feels really good. So we're looking at that and thinking how can we apply this in the future, and how can we continue to make World of Warcraft awesome?
Yeah, we really wanted to show Shadows of Argus as just an example of our willingness to continue to innovate in how we design World of Warcraft, right? When you're on Argus, you're still doing quests, you're still doing world quests, but we've also added a lot of things that we haven't done before, and we're always trying new things. And going to another world is something that you may remember that we've done before from Burning Crusade or Warlords of Draenor, but we've never gone to a new world in quite this way. And so we wanted to see, can we do justice to this world of Argus that we've heard so much about, using some of these really amazing backdrops that you've seen on the deck of the Vindikar and these kind of remote regions of Argus. Were we able to capture this entire planet without necessarily building an entire planet, right? And so that was something that was a great challenge for us, but we wanted to try some new things technically and artistically and design-wise to see if we could capture that. And it's something that we wanted to show as to our players, like, if we think that something is the right idea, we thought that Argus was the natural kind of climax of the Legion story, that we'll go there. We'll find a way to build it and find a way to share that with players. And so one thing you can be sure of to expect in the future is, you know, we will always do what we think is the coolest thing for World of Warcraft.
Cool. Bringing in, like, taking a little bit into innovating in World of Warcraft, and this is kind of not like a 7.3 kind of question, but more like a design in general. Are you looking into what other games, like other Blizzard games, are doing? For example, game modes in Overwatch or Heroes of Storm. Do you usually think about those game modes as something that can be brought into World of Warcraft, specifically in the PvP scene?
Yeah. So a thing about most Blizzard employees is that we play all of our games a lot. We're always talking with each other. We're constantly playing our stuff. We love Blizzard games. And so that's why you see things like the brawls that were added a few patches ago to World of Warcraft, based on things people saw in other games and ways they thought they might be able to adapt that for World of Warcraft. So it's something that we're constantly looking at. You know, we have to be careful, of course, because World of Warcraft is a different game, and we want to make it right for WoW, but it's definitely something that we look at a lot.
Great. And I have two more questions, just very briefly. Can we expect anything new from Brewfest, since it's September and Brewfest is coming really quick now?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. We actually do have some updates for Brewfest. One thing of note is that the current Dire Brew dungeon experience that you can queue for actually now scales. So you all the way it scales to the dungeons level all the way to 110, which I believe is 46. So on your another great opportunity in the 7.3 timeframe to hop on an alt and try that experience and get some really awesome loot along the way. And on the loot note, we also added a caster version of the Tankard of Terror offhand, so that that was somewhere where we felt like this experience didn't quite have the right enough loot for our casters, and so we wanted to make sure that we revisited that and added something so that your caster alt can have really great gear, or your caster main. Some of that gear is actually quite powerful, even at 110.
And finally from me, will Vigilant Quorum ever be my friend? Like, I'm tired of that guy being like, yeah, I kind of like you, but I don't like you. Will he ever be my friend?
I think you already know the answer to that question.
I don't know the answer to the question.
He's kind of a surly guy. I don't think he's ever going to be anyone's friend. But we like him, and we like that people really like his character. And we'd love to see him more in the future. We don't really have any plans to announce about that right now, but we definitely think he's a pretty cool guy.
All right. And just because I couldn't get your names at the very beginning of the interview, if you could introduce yourselves a little bit, just so that I can add that to the rest of the interview. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Michael Bybee. I am a senior game producer on World of Warcraft. For 7.3, I was the point producer for the entire patch. I worked with basically the rest of the team and a lot of other producers to make it happen, but that's me.
Yeah, my name is Johnny Cash. I'm a game designer on the World of Warcraft team, and I worked very closely with the rest of our very talented team members to kind of bring the Argus storyline to life.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't received the press bios, the dev bios, we'll make sure you get them before end of day. So just make sure you contact Daniel, Lorena, myself, and we'll send them your way.
All right, great.
All right. We have time for about 2 more questions.
Yeah.
All righty. Go ahead.
Sorry, could you clarify which content are you asking about specifically? I see. Okay, so you're saying world quests and invasion points on Argus for alts, yeah? Okay, just wanted to make sure. So as far as to what specifically is account-wide, what do you unlock for your alts on Argus? As you complete each chapter of the Argus campaign, you will unlock, as you mentioned, all of the Lightforge Beacon flight points for all of your alts. And in addition to that, you also unlock access to the Neverlight Crucible and the Seat of the Triumvirate Dungeon for your entire account. The things that you specifically do not unlock for your account are the world quests on Argus and the invasion points and greater invasion points. And so that is something that partially due to just how world quests are set up, we felt that it was best to have players go through that experience on alts to unlock that content, as a lot of the world quests actually rely on certain spawning and mechanics from the story, and so having them both active at the same time just results in a lot of bugs and technical problems. And part of why we're comfortable with that is that as you complete the Argus campaign on an alts, first of all, the access to some of those features, like especially the Lightforge Beacons, makes traveling through the storyline much, much easier. But in addition to that, our rewards team made sure that the Argus campaign rewards an immense amount of artifact power, and so it's actually something that you really don't want to skip on an alt, because it really helps you catch up your artifact and get to that, get progress on your artifact traits on the Neverlight Crucible quickly. So it's actually really to players' benefit that we make sure that you can work through the Argus campaign on alts. Yeah.
Just have a last question about world quests, since we're talking about it. This system, how happy is the team about this system, and how likely are we to see world quests keep coming up at the next expansion?
I would say overall the team is very happy with them. There's, we listen to feedback, so there are definitely things we want to do to improve it going forward. But if you kind of compare sort of the end game in Warlords of Draenor and the end game in Legion, and one of the big things that you notice is that you can log on to Legion any day and go find stuff to do. And a big part of that is world quests. I know for me personally, I'm still farming emissary bags because I want some of those mounts that I think are really interesting, especially the Stormdrake for Stormheim. And so I find myself actually way more interested in playing the game, in part because of world quests. One of the things that we want to address as we kind of figure this thing out for the future is we want the world quest experience to be something that mixes it up, right? When you do world quests, we want you to have options, feel like you're having a little bit of a different experience, and then it doesn't get boring over time. So we're looking at ways to improve that. But I definitely think you'll see some version of the world quest system in the future.
Yeah, one of the things that we're most happy about with the world quest system, and then really one of our goals as a team, is to keep the world relevant, right? As Michael was mentioning, even while you're adventuring on Argus and leveling up there and defeating the Burning Crusade and doing all those really exciting, awesome things, you can still help the High Mountain Tauren, you can still help Prince Ferondus and all of his buds. And one of the great successes we think of the system is that the world stays relevant for you. Even as we're in one of the later patches of the Legion cycle, you can still do some of those earlier quests. Some of the other benefits of the world quest system too are, when you're logging on, you can make actual meaningful choices. What emissary am I trying to complete today? What world quest might have a reward that I want, whether it's gear or orbital resources or gold or whatever it might be. And that also just offers flexibility. And then maybe there's a certain world quest that you don't like. We're okay with you saying, I don't really want to do that one. I'll do this other one that still satisfies some of the goals I'm trying to hit. And so we really like the flexibility of the system. We really feel like it lets players kind of tailor their experience to their own personal interests. And that's something, just to touch on it super briefly, that's something that we also really like about how dungeons have worked out in Legion. We really feel that dungeons have continued to stay relevant as we've increased their difficulty and rewards across the Legion lifetime. And the Mythic Plus system, I think we can all agree, has been a great success in terms of making sure that the stories that you experience throughout Legion are ones that remain with you. And so while Argus is an exciting new world and has a lot of really, really cool things to see, and will continue to have a lot of real interesting things to see, the rest of the Broken Isles and all the peoples there still have things for you to do.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Essa foi a entrevista com os desenvolvedores da Blizzard sobre o patch 7.3 e sobre os elementos de World of Warcraft. Mas e vocês? O que vocês acharam da entrevista? Teve alguma resposta que chamou a atenção de vocês? Teve alguma resposta que vocês concordaram totalmente? Vocês adoraram o que a Blizzard falou? Teve alguma resposta que vocês discordaram? Vocês odiaram o que foi apresentado para os desenvolvedores? Deixa um comentário aqui embaixo com a opinião de vocês sobre o assunto. Codex, muito obrigado por assistir.